And since you were the man responsible for asking agencies hard questions about why do you have that data and what is high valued, take it away.
Thank you, Jason. Thanks, Michael. Thanks to Symantec for having me here today. Similar to Michael, I spent some time reflecting on the theme we have for today, or I guess it's someplace. Complex challenges and bold solutions. And I think our tendency, particularly in the IT world, and it could be a gender thing because I think it's mostly men in the room. I've been to RSA. I think there's more males than females. And I think guys typically really like solving problems when we have no idea what the problem is. We really like solutions, right? Christmas is coming, throw the instructions away. I know it's supposed to look like a red truck at the end of the day, and I'll just work on that. And so we shift to solutions. But I want to spend a little bit of time on, and I spent some reflecting on the complex challenge part, similar to Michael's question of what is it that makes cyber a complex challenge. And thinking about it, 3 historical challenges came to my mind that I think are complex that I just want to throw out and then try to connect. On January 15th, 2009, US Airways Flight 1549 took off from LaGuardia Airport, ran into a flock of geese, disabled both engines, and you now had an airplane flying over New York City with no engines and 155 people on board. Feels like I'm not a pilot, haven't flown, but it feels like a complex challenge to me. On April 11th, 1970, the 7th manned mission to the moon took off from the Kennedy Space Center. 2 days later, an oxygen tank exploded, leaving the Apollo 13 mission in space without enough oxygen, without enough power, unable to complete their mission. Again, floating in outer space, not sure whether to continue going to the moon, to come home, or just to start writing goodbye letters that no one will get. Seems like a complex challenge. On June 2nd, 1609, the Sea Venture left England as the flagship of a group of 7 vessels headed to resupply Jamestown. Then very much a struggling colony here in Virginia, or in Virginia across the river. And on July 24th, they ran into a storm. We believe it was a hurricane. Historians believe it was the storm that Shakespeare's Tempest was modeled after. The next day, after 24 hours in this storm, exhausted crew, 9 feet of water inside the boat, they spotted land. The captain decided, I'm going to go for land, because if I'm going to sink, I'd rather be closer to shore. Makes sense. Ended up driving the vessel up onto a coral reef. Somehow, miraculously, the coral reef was shaped like a V, held the vessel in shape, and they offloaded 150 people and 1 dog to the island we now know as Bermuda. Spent the next couple days essentially trying to salvage what they could from the vessel as they watched the waves in the coral reef destroy their ship. So 150 people stranded on an island. If you have to be stranded on an island, Bermuda's a nice one. I don't know what it's like as an uninhabited island, but I know it's nice today. So 150 people and a dog stranded on Bermuda. No one knows where they are. Everyone has assumed they've died. A complex challenge. And so when I think about cybersecurity and what is it that makes cybersecurity a complex challenge, I think we try to equate it to my 3 examples. I think we look at, and I can say for all 3 of those, there was a technology failure, right? Something went wrong. The geese aren't technology, but clearly having no engines was a bit of a technology failure. There was, something had been installed wrong or done wrong on the Apollo 13 spacecraft that allowed for that explosion, so you had a technology problem you were working on. The Sea Venture wasn't seaworthy enough to stand up to the hurricane. Not an uncommon problem even today, but clearly they didn't have the technology. They didn't know where they were. They'd spent a couple days in the dark, had been unable to have any idea where they were. And so, again, a technology problem. And I think when we look at cybersecurity as purely a technology problem, we end up thinking that there are these technology solutions to it, that there are simple solutions, as Jason and Michael were just talking about. And I think one of the things that is very different about cybersecurity is that we have an adversary, right? We have this malicious cyber actor, a very fancy sort of phrase that we use for the bad guy, whoever that might be, but we have people who are trying to get into our systems and undermine our systems. All our IT systems, as Michael said, they have vulnerabilities. They're built by people like you and I. They're built by humans, and so we build things that are flawed, and we build things that have vulnerabilities, and the vulnerabilities themselves are not necessarily the issue. It's that somebody wants to exploit them. And so it is a very different where we don't just have this if we could just build the perfect system, because we're not going to be able to build the perfect system. So we need to think differently about the challenge that is cybersecurity. And so I think it is very much a people problem. It is a people problem on a couple of fronts. One, the fact that we have this adversary, that we have someone who's trying to undermine our system. For the most part, Captain Sullenberg of Flight 1549, no one was trying to make it so his engines wouldn't work when he took off. Similar in the other cases, there wasn't this explicit adversary working against them. And so we have a people challenge where we've got the adversary, and we also don't have enough of the people to defend ourselves adequately. As Michael pointed out, we expect in the federal government, everyone across the board is held accountable to the same degree, to the same level, and we expect them to be able to provide the same capabilities from a defense standpoint. So as we look at what the challenge is and how we want to tackle it, I think there's a couple things Michael touched on that we are absolutely looking at. In May, the president signed an executive order. You're probably familiar with it, Executive Order 13800 on cybersecurity of federal networks and critical infrastructure. And it's got 4 main areas. I'm not going to walk you through it in detail, but the first is federal cybersecurity, and I'll come back to that. The second is critical infrastructure, which of course is transportation, energy, water, telecommunications, much of the things that make our daily lives work. Third area is our international engagements, our international deterrence. And then the fourth piece is the cybersecurity workforce, workforce inside the federal government, inside the Department of Defense, and across the nation as a whole. And I think it's, the fourth one is really important that we have. Workforce may even be too narrow because it's not just about the cyber workforce, it's about cyber awareness across the board. The third one on international is very much about that adversary, right? What can we do about the adversary? How can we disrupt the adversary in some way to make it harder for them to get into our systems that we know have vulnerabilities? And then if you look at the first two areas, it's about what are we doing from a defense standpoint? No one who runs critical infrastructure, none of you who run government IT systems are happy that there's vulnerabilities in your system. We all know there are vulnerabilities in our systems, and yet our ability to focus on them, our ability to have the skills we need in our organizations to eradicate all of the vulnerabilities. At the same time, by the way, we're buying new ones every day, right? We buy a new tool and plug it in every day, and it comes with brand new vulnerabilities, yay. At least yay for our adversaries. And so how do we move forward and get the right people focused on our ability to defend ourselves in this environment? And so, one of the things out of the federal cybersecurity is we have an IT modernization report that will be out publicly soon. It was out once for public comment already. And that really talks about how do we move towards cloud services in the government? How do we move towards shared services? To Michael's point, how do we make it so the Marine Mammal Commission doesn't have to worry about their own IT and, by extension, their own cybersecurity? Because we're never, certainly in the government, and I would say in private industry, we're never going to be able to get the workforce we need. We're never going to be able to get the people we need to defend all of these different systems in a lot of different ways. And quite frankly, we end up just stealing each other's workforce, stealing each other's employees, moving them around. It's great for, some of us where you can bounce back and forth and just make more and more money. But for the overall ecosystem of how we do defense, we need to move towards more towards these shared services, more towards consolidation, so that we've got, we need a smaller number of higher skilled experts that can really spend their time figuring out and identifying what are the vulnerabilities that are in my system, as opposed to waiting for someone else to tell me about them. because I contend that across certainly the federal government, I'm sure a lot of our agencies learn of these vulnerabilities from the Department of Homeland Security, from a Symantec, from some other supplier, which is great. We want to share that information. We have to share information. It is a part of the solution. However,
Sorry,
oops.
my fault.
We have to share information because it is part of the solution.
It's just a malicious cyber actor back there.
Exactly. But we've got to shrink our threat surface, and we're not going to shrink it. It's going to continue to expand, but we've got to shrink the places where we really need to be focused, where we really need to be applying our security and our personnel, and we've got to get some parts of the government just out of the business of trying to do that defense on their own, because I don't think they're going to be able, we will be able to do it across the board to the degree and the level that we need to. So I guess from an aha moment, I have really two thoughts to leave you with. One, really focus on the complex challenges. Spend more time thinking about what is the question, what is the challenge, and then once we fully understand it, we can work on the solutions and what those solutions are and the answers to those questions. I think we spend too much time jumping to the end. And then secondly, it's about people. Our technology is run by people, it's built by people, it's attacked by people, and so understanding the people and the motivations on both sides of that are really important, and our ability to get those right skills into all of our organizations is critical for moving forward. So, thank you.
All right, so don't go anywhere. We're going to continue our
I
discussion.
have my stuff to pick up.
Oh, okay, yeah, no worries. So both Jeanette Manford from DHS earlier talked about this. You kind of built on it, so it's good to see that the right hand and the left hand, if you will, around cyber is working together.
We try to do that.
One of the things she talked about was shared services. What can DHS do in some ways so agencies, the Marine Mammal Commission is Mike's favorite example, to get out of that piece. And then, so let me start there. Where are we at with shared services? We have the Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation Program. We know that is a really good pilot, if you will, or for lack of a better word, around shared services, standards-based. There's a pot of money that's being pushed out to agencies. Everyone's kind of walking down the same path, though with different vendors, but they're at least on the same path. Where are shared services today from where you sit at OMB/NSC?
So I don't think we're where we need to be. I think as we look holistically at shared services and we look at IT modernization across the government, we need to bring those two things together. I think it's very hard, my background is as a CIO for years, and from an IT operations standpoint, it's really hard to separate your IT operations and your cybersecurity. In fact, my CISO complained one time too many about the ops guys being slow at patching that I put him in charge of ops. And
how did that work, by the way?
It actually worked really well. He complained differently, but he did not stop complaining. Certainly complained. He got a very new appreciation. And so I think one of the challenges is that we have this thing that we have this unicorn we call cybersecurity, and we think it's different and special and aside from information technology in our IT operations. And I think we have to look at them holistically, because to expect the Department of Homeland Security or anyone else to be the defense, much like commercial industry sometimes expects the government to be the defense, but have nothing to do with the operations, have none of the NSA boxes on their networks. Not that I'm advocating that we should have NSA boxes on their networks, but it's just a dichotomy. And so we have to view it holistically of how are we doing our IT operations, because it's in that base of IT operations where we get our foundational security, and then we can layer things on top of that. You mentioned there's 60 laws.
Probably more now, but
I'm sure they're all helpful. And yet, I think to really move where we've got to move to, we're going to have to explore which of those are helping us get towards the shared services environment we need to get towards, and whether or not any of them make it harder for us to get there. Not that they necessarily do, but I think we have both some authorities that we're going to have to work out, as well as some of the desires of different agencies.